I deserve alimony, Jack, he shouted, storming out of the hospital room. I tried to call after him, hoping for a moment of reason, but my words went unheard as he left without looking back. That was the moment I realized I was now facing life as a single woman battling cancer. Oddly enough, the weight in my chest seemed to ease, as if my feelings for Jack had already begun to fade. As I came to terms with my newfound single status, I couldn't shake the thought that Jack, who had treated me so coldly and always put his own needs first, was due for some kind of cosmic reckoning. These thoughts fueled my desire for a kind of revenge. My name is Emma, a woman in her 50s, once a housewife in a marriage to Jack that I now see was filled with turmoil. We never had children, and although I initially believed we had a strong partnership, over time, it became clear that a wide gap had formed between us. My idea of marriage involved mutual support and facing life's difficulties together, but with Jack, there was just emptiness. "Where's the food? I'm in a rush," Jack snapped at me, cutting into my thoughts as I returned from an errand. His self-centered attitude was nothing new. Jack, an office worker with occasional time off, used those breaks solely for his own pleasure. In the 3 decades we were married, he never once lifted a finger to help around the house, insisting that housework was my responsibility alone. Even when I fell ill, Jack showed no compassion. On days when I struggled just to get out of bed, Jack would demand meals without a second thought. He never once took the time to care for me when I was sick. Instead, he would declare, "I've got plans with friends, just leave me alone," before heading out for drinks, returning late and drunk. Our views on marriage couldn't have been more different. While I tried everything I could to make it work in the early years, Jack remained immovable, never acknowledging any mistakes and dismissing my concerns with, "Don't complain, you're just a housewife." My affection for Jack had long since withered. It wasn't that I wanted to rely on him. I too am human, and there are hard days. All I hoped for was his support during those times, but Jack showed none. Once I saw the extent of his indifference, the distance between us only grew. Confronting Jack seemed pointless, and over time, just the thought of facing him became a source of dread. Our marriage had turned cold, and I knew there was no point in continuing it. Then, something strange happened to my body. Though I had always been prone to illnesses, this time I knew something was different. I called my father, who rushed me to the hospital. The diagnosis was cancer, fortunately caught early, with a good chance for recovery. Ready to start treatment, I asked my father to bring essentials from home, and I quickly checked into the hospital. Jack was at work, so I informed him briefly via text about my diagnosis and the hospital admission. As the reality of a long, painful treatment settled in, anxiety about the uncertain future gripped me. Surprisingly, it was Jack who occupied my mind in these vulnerable moments. Despite believing my love for him had long faded, a small part of me still wanted to see him, to spend time as a married couple, even in my weakened state. Maybe, just maybe, someone as indifferent as Jack would show some concern. I yearned for a simple "Are you okay?" or even a visit. I wanted to see Jack's face, just once. I couldn't help but wonder if he was struggling with the chores I had always handled. Guilt washed over me for not being able to maintain the home. But after days of waiting, Jack never showed. My texts, marked as read, went unanswered. No simple response like "okay," or even "are you okay," ever came. It was as if he didn't care at all, unaware of my battle with cancer or my fragile state. The stark reality of Jack's indifference became almost unbearable. I realized how naive I had been. Was it really so wrong to want a little care from my husband when I was fighting for my life? I wondered where things had gone so wrong. I didn't want to burden him. I simply wanted to feel his concern, even if it was just a little, but that small, selfish desire remained unmet. Resolute, I decided to stop expecting anything from Jack and focused on my battle with cancer. The physical pain was unrelenting, the treatments tore at my body, and countless sleepless nights left me in agony. At times, I thought about quitting, letting my deteriorating health take its course, to end the suffering, but my parents' constant reassurance that it would get better kept me going. Even on the darkest days, their words pushed me forward, bringing me to this point. One afternoon, as I lay weak and staring at the ceiling, the door to my room opened unexpectedly. I hadn't expected a visit from my parents, so I wondered who it could be. When I turned my tired gaze toward the door, I was stunned to see Jack standing there. Had he finally come to check on me? He saw my frail, worn-out state, and I was left speechless, flooded with a mix of thoughts. Would my deterioration only fuel his contempt? Jack, seemingly unaware of my turmoil, casually sat by my bed and stared at me. Then he broke the silence with a laugh. "So, this is what cancer does to you, huh? You look awful. definitely not a woman anymore. His words struck a cold blow. In the midst of fighting for my life, those were the last things I needed to hear. I wished he would just remain silent, but instead, he went on, uncaring of how much his words hurt. Since you've been gone, every day's been great. Sure, the house is a mess, but I hardly go home. Life without you is surprisingly easy. Jack's cruelty stung. Why did he have to speak to me like that? Why couldn't he offer a single word of comfort? Anger boiled within me, but my weakened body prevented me from lashing out. I could only stare at him, empty and numb. Jack laughed again, then said something that took my breath away. Oh, by the way, I've already filed for divorce. I'm taking the house in the property settlement. You have no say in it, Jack declared. His words sent the room spinning. He had filed for divorce without consulting me. Before I could even begin to absorb the shock, Jack continued, coldly adding, I've fallen in love with someone else. She's 20 years younger than I am. His words crashed over me like a tidal wave, forcing me to come to terms with the reality that he was serious about someone else. As I processed the information, the unsettling thought of an affair flashed through my mind. Seemingly satisfied by the bombshell he dropped, Jack began to prepare to leave, ignoring my pleas to wait. It was clear to me now that the love Jack once had for me had vanished. The pain in my chest deepened, but strangely, the emotional turmoil reached a point where I no longer cared. With a deep sigh of acceptance, I spoke just one sentence, allowing him to leave. He walked out with a smirk, leaving me to face the painful truth of our broken marriage. In the aftermath, I decided I would fight even harder against my illness. Despite the agony, I was determined to fully recover from cancer, pouring every ounce of my energy into treatment. 2 days passed, seemingly short, but unbearably long for someone battling sleepless nights and uncertainty. Amidst the torment, doubt crept in. Had Jack really finalized the divorce, or was this just another manipulation to play on my anxieties? A secret plan began to form in my mind, one to expose Jack completely. I believed that once he learned of my scheme, even someone as heartless as Jack would feel the impact. Just as I expected, Jack called me, unable to answer in the hospital room. I ignored his persistent calls. The constant vibrations became unbearable, so I texted him, "Stop calling." The call stopped, but then a flood of messages followed. Desperate pleas filled my inbox, with promises to apologize and make amends. Each message seemed like a transparent attempt to save himself. Perhaps Jack was starting to realize why I had so easily agreed to the unilateral divorce. When he asked if he could visit, I stayed silent at first, growing impatient. He sent another message. Reluctantly, I replied, "Fine." Despite the exhaustion from my ongoing battle with illness, I couldn't bear the thought of enduring his incessant calls any longer, so I agreed. When Jack entered my hospital room, his voice was frantic, an obvious sign that he was feeling trapped. While to an outsider, his reaction might have seemed exaggerated, I knew it was only natural for him to panic. After all, I held the upper hand. I was ready for Jack's arrival, determined to bring him down. He burst in, demanding an explanation for my actions. Without hesitation, Jack slapped my bank book on the table, staring in disbelief at the balance, over $1 billion saved up. "What's going on here?" he gasped. "I had no idea you had $6 million in assets. If I'd known, I wouldn't have." "Well, you never asked." I cut him off. "Who would expect a housewife like me to have that kind of money? If I'd known about this, I never would have divorced you," Jack exclaimed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jack, who had initiated the divorce without my consent, was now complaining that he would have acted differently if he'd known about my financial assets. His words were selfish, focusing only on how the money affected him. Frustrated, Jack pressed me for the source of the money, and I decided it was time to reveal the truth. "Actually, the $6 million comes from investments," I explained. "I started about 5 years ago, with advice from my parents. While your salary was enough to cover our expenses, I wanted to contribute more. Under my father's guidance, I learned to invest. This $6 million is the profit from those investments." As Jack absorbed the news, I added, "I was planning to tell you eventually, but then cancer struck, and suddenly you wanted a divorce. What could I do? I never meant to keep it a secret forever. I planned to tell you once I recovered, so we could use the money to build a better future together. But by then, it was too late." Jack had made his choice, and now all $6 million would likely be mine. As I finished telling my story, Jack's face flushed with fury. He demanded alimony and compensation for what he called my deception. Overwhelmed by the sum of money, Jack made outrageous demands. Despite my resolve to stand my ground, Jack continued to insist on getting his hands on the 6 million. As the argument grew heated, his shouting became unbearable. It was clear that reasoning with him was pointless. Without further hesitation, I decided to put an end to it. "Remember, you're the one who filed for divorce," I reminded him. "You forced me into this. I always knew you were cold-hearted," I continued, raising my voice in anger, "but I never imagined you would go this far." I recounted how, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I had hoped, more than anything, that Jack would show some concern. Instead, he filed for divorce and took the house. Now, with my wealth exposed, he returned to blame me. "I never meant to keep it from you," I said, my voice breaking. "I was just waiting for the right moment. You took that away from me." My words were an eruption of all the hurt I had swallowed for so many years. For so long, I had accepted Jack's selfishness, thinking that we were partners who should stick together through thick and thin. But now, all I felt for him was rage and disbelief. As Jack continued to berate me, I realized there was no point in continuing the conversation. I begged him to stop, reminding him once again that it was he who had chosen to end our marriage. The anger I felt toward him overshadowed even the physical pain from my cancer. I couldn't help but wonder how he had become so utterly self-centered. When Jack's mistress eventually found out about my financial assets, Jack, now desperate, knelt before me and begged for the $6 million. The man I had once loved, now reduced to this pathetic plea, left me feeling disgusted and disappointed. I called for the nurse, asking them to escort Jack out of my room. Despite his attempts to visit afterward, he was never allowed back in. I fought valiantly against cancer, and after declaring myself fully healed, I was discharged from the hospital. Now, with part of the 6 million, I'm living a peaceful, comfortable life. At 50, I've had enough of marriage. I'm planning to spend the rest of my life alone, content, free, and no longer weighed down by anyone else's expectations. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video, and stay stunned.